Fit to Love is physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness to achieve the happy life you deserve. From exercise to cooking, relationships, and spirituality, you'll find all the inspiration you need right here with our host, JJ Flizanes.
Hello and welcome to Fit to Love Tasty Tuesdays, all about cooking, all about nutrition, and all about you. If there's something you'd like to see on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at info@invisiblefitness.com. Enjoy the show. Today's show, homemade tomato sauce. A couple years ago, I had my first food sensitivity test, and what came out on that test was that I was sensitive to oregano. Now, as a Greek and Italian, that's a problem, because in most jarred sauces, there's oregano. It's in all Italian dishes, and it's in a lot of Greek dishes as well. So at that point in time, I started to make my own tomato sauce, and from then, I've never looked back. Homemade tomato sauce is the best. You can spice it the way you want to. It's fresh. The flavor is there's no preservatives in it. It's just amazing. And again, you can make it as thick or as thin as you want. And what's great about it is that we have a garden. And this year especially, our tomatoes just sort of rose from the ashes. We did nothing and we had all these tomatoes. So through the course of the season, rather than trying to hurry up and use the tomatoes or give them away, I froze them. So you can freeze tomatoes whole. Like I literally have a whole freezer full of bagged tomatoes waiting to make homemade tomato sauce. Now you're thinking, well, what are you gonna do with all that tomato sauce? I freeze it. So we have some containers, and when we're done with this process, I'll show you how you can store. And if you're good at canning or jarring, I don't know how to do that yet, but you could do that as well, so you don't need to take up the freezer space. But for me, the freezer works just fine. So I have some tomatoes that just came off the tomato plant maybe a week ago, and they're not perfect, and we're not using them as much as I would like to. So even if you have a tomato that's starting to sort of get a little soft or a little wrinkly, it's perfect to use for tomato sauce. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these up, and I'm gonna cut big chunks. You don't need very much. So I'm just gonna get rid of these first. In fact, putting into fours would be good. And even if they're a little imperfect, it won't really matter. Because at the end, you're gonna blend it. All right, let's get that out of the way. Okay, next I'm gonna I had a little bit of leftover red onion, and so it's not like you have to use the red onion, but I had it left over, so why not use it? I'm gonna slice big chunks, because again, it's all gonna get blended later. Then I'm using a nice, large, sweet, organic onion, Hawaiian onion. And again, I am making big chunks because it's gonna be blended down. I'm throwing it all into the pot. You can use a cast iron pot, whatever kind of pot you'd like to use, steel, metal, aluminum. Okay, the garlic. Nice big chunk of garlic. And again, it may be that I use a little bit more later. I'm gonna add a little bit of olive oil. I've got organic cold pressed olive oil. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna saute that on low heat with the cover on. With the cover on, cooks the tomatoes and it softens the skin, so later when we put the blending stick in it, it blends to a perfectly smooth sauce with no chunks in it. Now, if you like chunks, we can blend it differently so that you maintain some of those chunks. Now, when it comes to the frozen tomatoes, I'm not even gonna cut them. I'm gonna stick them in whole into the pot. I'm gonna fill the pot up with tomatoes, put the lid on it, and put it on the stove. So go ahead and just stick your tomatoes in the pot. Again, I've got plenty of tomatoes, so I'm gonna fill it as high as I can. In fact, I still have tomatoes in the freezer. But I'm gonna need to make more sauce later. And of course, because I grew these tomatoes, my husband grew them, they're organic. There's no pesticides used. We use all natural things to help enhance the soil. In fact, I don't even think I'm gonna be able to fit all my tomatoes in this pot. So just make sure you put enough in that you can still put the lid on. So I'm going to turn it on medium heat to start, just to get it going, and to sort of saute those onions at the bottom of the pan. And then I'm going to leave it on for about 20 or 30 minutes to start. Okay, now we're gonna move to the second stage of our homemade tomato sauce. I'm actually going to put an apron on this time because now we're gonna get into the blending stage and I don't wanna splatter on my pretty blue shirt. So, put the apron on, and yes, normally if I'm cooking for other people, my hair would be back as well. But we're filming and you're not tasting my stuff right now. So I'm gonna say that you wanna cook these tomatoes down for probably about an hour or even 2 hours on low, because you wanna evaporate some of that water. Once it's cooked down pretty well, and it's currently still on low. So I'm gonna add a nice bunch of healthy organic basil. I love basil. So I'm not even gonna cut it up, I'm just gonna stick it in whole. I'm gonna stir it around just to make sure it starts to just soften up a little bit from the heat that's already been in the tomatoes. You don't need to overcook your herbs. It takes the flavor out of them. So I try to save all the herbs for the end, right before I'm gonna blend. That way it can soak and those flavors and aromas can be released into it versus cooked out of them. All right, so now that my basil's been in here for a couple minutes, here comes how we make tomato sauce. The most important piece of equipment for tomato sauce is the Cuisinart Smart Stick. It's a blending stick. It has made all the difference for so many different things for me because it means you don't have to take it out of the pot. First, I'm gonna shut the burner off, and then I'm gonna stick the blending stick in the pot, and this is why I'm wearing an apron. You're gonna stick it all the way down. It's not gonna hurt your pot because it has these teeth and the blade is up in there. So the blade isn't gonna actually touch the bottom of the pot. So you can just put it right down, and I'm gonna press. So the next most exciting thing, and I have to thank Rosanna Garcia Stella, thank you for introducing me to this lovely thing. So in order for us to make sure the water evaporates out of the pot, because if we put the lid back on, it keeps the moisture in and we want the water to evaporate. But if we leave this topless and it starts to boil, then you're gonna get splatters of tomato sauce everywhere. So in order to do that, we have this wonderful screen that we're just gonna lay over top of the pot. So that way the water can evaporate, the sauce can thicken, and we're not making a mess. So we're gonna leave this on for probably another 40 minutes, then we're gonna check back. So to finish up with our sauce, it's been cooking down for about 2 hours, maybe closer to 3 on low. So the water's been evaporating and we've got several inches that it's cooked down, so we're getting thicker and thicker. I've turned the burner off and I'm actually leaving it uncovered so that as it starts to cool down, it's still gonna continue to evaporate and thicken. Wait until it's cool enough and then add your spices. So what I'm going to be adding to this once it's cool enough, because you can spice to taste. Make sure you just start off with a little bit, stir it around and give it a taste. Wash your spoon off before you go back in if you're gonna share it with anyone else so that you don't spread some germs. And if it's just for you, then do what you wanna do. So I'm gonna use some high mineral sea salt as my salt. I like to add a little bit of that South African smoke. It gives it a nice rich flavor. It's not just tomato. There's really a complex array of different flavors from the basil and the paprika. And then I add a little touch paprika more. I'm gonna add extra garlic powder if I didn't put enough garlic in the beginning. And then I'm gonna add some ground pepper. And then because I like a little heat to my tomato sauce, I'm gonna add a dash of cayenne pepper. I may add in a couple other things. Another tip that I would give you, if that it's too acidic, and there's something a little off about the tomatoes, or maybe they weren't in season or they weren't ripe enough, you can add 1 teaspoon of sugar to this entire pot. And I would use, again, coconut sugar. I would not use white sugar. Don't use honey or maple syrup, it'll taste weird. But using 1 maybe teaspoon of coconut sugar will actually kind of calm down that acidic level, and it will round out the flavor a little bit. It's not necessary, so make sure you taste it first. Don't just add sugar. If you can do sugar-free, that's great. So, and then when I'm done, I'm gonna take these plastic containers, once it's cooled and spiced to my liking, I'm gonna store my tomato sauce in this plastic container. It's BPA-free. I'm not gonna fill it all the way up. I'm gonna leave about 1 inch at the top because it'll expand when it freezes. I'm gonna put the lid on it. Again, remember, it's all cool, and I'm gonna go freeze it in my freezer, so that way when I'm wanting to make a homemade pizza or use some squash to make a paleo spaghetti or make some kind of pasta dish out of vegetables, I have my homemade sauce ready to go.
The Fit to Love podcast show offers you 6 days a week of helpful content to achieve the happy life you deserve.
Movement Mondays and Tasty Tuesdays are weekly videocasts, while Wellness Wednesdays, Thoughtful Thursdays, Freedom Fridays, and Sexy Saturdays are audio-only shows themed every week to address your holistic life and needs. If the show inspired you, we would love for you to share it and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Head on over to fittolove.tv for recaps of every show, resources, and to join the community. That's FIT, the number 2, LOVE.TV. Have a fit and fabulous day.